All right. So again, welcome everyone to the Bridge the Gap and Simon's VIP Connect SYNGAP1 virtual family meeting. Our presentation today is going to be Monica Weldon providing an update on the SYNGAP1 registry. So Monica, I think I'm going to be control over to you now.
Okay, it's controlled. Okay, let me see here. There we go. Hi everybody. This is Monica, and I know that I have not met a lot of you in person, but I am really excited that you guys joined the call today. I just wanted to go over some quick updates on the foundation and kind of where we're going and what we're doing. Let's see here. Okay. First, our mission as an organization is to serve, educate, and fund research for families coping with the effects of SYNGAP mutation. And of course, many of you already know what SYNGAP1 is in a nutshell, because you live with it every day, just like myself. But it's a gene located on chromosome 6p21.3 that results in intellectual disability ranging from mild to severe, epilepsy, a multitude of other comorbidities, of course, that we all know about. And it's associated with attention deficits, impulsivity, and mood disorders. Currently, the research shows that 94 to 100% of all our SYNGAP1 patients will have some form of epilepsy or combined epilepsy. SYNGAP1 is also to believe linked to all autism spectrum disorders and plays an important role in brain plasticity, which are very huge things with this gene. We have 4 primary goals for our organization, and that is to raise awareness of SYNGAP1 and unite SYNGAP1 patient families. Our second goal is to educate researchers and medical professionals and to improve time to early diagnosis and identifying potential treatments that could help our children now. We would like to create a behavior and medical profile of SYNGAP1 patients by using data provided by the SYNGAP1 MRD5 patient registry, which right now we actually are proposing a project like that with the current data we have now to classify or to segregate out the actual gene with the information we have. Our other goal is to educate families, clinicians, to create customized treatment plans to get the best results and outcomes for progress made, to have better outcomes and progress made for each individual. Many of you that are new to the group, I know some of you have been with us since the beginning, but I wanted to show kind of the history of this gene and how far we've come in such a short amount of time as an organization. In 1998, of course, it was co-discovered by Dr. Rick Hugener and Mary Kennedy. The first mouse model was made in 2002. And the first human was identified by Dr. Jacques Michaud in the Michaud lab at University of Montreal in 2009. 2012 was when the first studies addressing the mechanisms of this gene started in Dr. Gavin Rumbaugh's lab. Going on from there, 2 years later, I had founded the organization in 2014, and we are focused solely on SYNGAP1 mutations. In 2016, we had our first international conference, and we also launched the one and only combined MRD SYNGAP1 patient registry natural history study. And currently now, in 2017, Dr. Rumbaugh won a $2 million grant at Scripps to run the entire NIH drug library to look for a molecule to either do gene therapy or create a medication that would help alleviate some of the symptoms that our children have. Ongoing since 2017, oops, hold on. We are now, I wanted to explain how our organization helps drive the research. And one of those is having organization, stakeholder, and scientific meetings. And the primary goal of this is to collaborate and try to find a synergistic way of getting to where we need to go faster, but also smarter. Even though science is really slow in comparison to the typical discovery of a drug, we pretty much as an organization are going light speed because of the 20 years worth of mouse model data collected before a patient group was found. We are now in translational science, and what that means is we can find mechanisms using the data out of our registry, just like we did in the recent months, to find a new mechanism of how this gene works. So we have these scientific conferences, and we actually are having our next scientific conference scheduled for November 27th through the 29th at Scripps Florida Research. The organization has currently spent $25,500 to fund this meeting. We did find out last week that we won our NIH grant, or the National Institutes of Health of Neurological, oh my goodness, I can't even remember what 9 stands for. Neurological and stroke and disabilities at the National Institutes of Health. And we are co-presenting with Texas Children's Hospital, Johns Hopkins, and Scripps, Florida. But we won $15,000 from the NIH. The intended audience is actually for young investigators, researchers, and clinicians. We're not going to discourage families or adult family members to come to learn a little bit more, but this is going to be a high-level scientific conference. And we're not bringing the children this time to this particular event. This event the aims of this event are to get all of the scientists in one room to start thinking about where to go with the information they have found out, and asking the questions of where they need to go from here. So we have that coming up. We are, however, planning in November of 2020, because we do our major meetings pretty much every 2 years because of the funding, because they are very expensive meetings. We are planning a stakeholder meeting like the one we had in 2016, bringing all the scientists, the clinicians, and the families together. And our goal for this particular meeting is to actually collect clinical information, just as we did with our pilot program that we did at Kennedy Krieger with the 8 children that they saw, and they're actually using that data to form a baseline for what we call a prospective natural history, where we're going to be focusing on those in our centers of excellence at Johns Hopkins and at Texas Children's. We are also trying to work out some partnerships with some of the other international groups as well that see patients, and we're trying to get one on the West Coast as well. So this all takes time, and putting the right people together and doing what's needed to help get all this set up. Of course, we have family meetups. We are going we tentatively right now have started planning a meeting in the UK for June of 2019. We are right now waiting to hear back from some researchers who can commit on speaking at this particular meeting. Depending on funding and depending on the spring, we were going to try to do a meetup on the West Coast. But we would like to be able to get some researchers involved so we can start a center of excellence over there and have it there. So we are currently working on that project as well. We like the family meetups that we have. Our primary objective is to educate and also get the patients in front of the scientists to do their work. It becomes very meaningful, and knowledge is power for everyone. And it helps drive the research, and it puts the patient as part of that puzzle piece that typically in not so conventional science way back in the past was not heard of, as having the patient involved and their voice heard. And so these are just some things of how we drive research and some values that we believe in, and that's pretty much in summary of what I just went over. We believe in the patients being involved, and we believe that they are the key to helping these researchers find the answers to the questions that they have in a much more accelerated fashion. And we're hoping to get to a clinical trial one day with some of the work that's being done now. I wanted to go over some research partnerships. These are partnerships currently that are ongoing with actual SYNGAP1 animal models, and also the use of some of the human stem cells that actually, the partnership between Scripps and Baylor College of Medicine, they just received their stem cells from children they collected blood from in Houston. We also have advocacy partnerships. We're about to join Eurordis in the UK. We are part of Unique as well. This is from last year's annual report, but these are some of the particular advocacy partnerships we have very close relationships with, both legislatively and also in driving the research and awareness for us. These guys help us. Some current independent research studies that we have going on that the parents can get involved with right now are the Simon's VIP, which is the study that we're going to go over now. We're also involved with the Rare Epilepsy Network, and we're also we are one of the 2 pilot programs currently right now in rare disease going through Face to Gene, which was a huge partnership with a Boston technology company who's going to help try to come up with an algorithm to be able to pinpoint patients before genetic testing so that we can narrow down the genetic tests they need to take. And then also we just launched a quality of life study, and I have posted that in the group in events. I'm going to start posting those things in the events. I think inviting people will bring them a little bit more awareness instead of posting it in a thread. So that is there. It's a 15-minute survey. We need quality of life studies so that we can pinpoint and have evidence, so when we get to a clinical trial, we have all that, the basis of pretty much why we need the therapy and what it will do for our children in the long run. Okay, the biggest thing you can do right now is we're gathering valuable data from the patient community, and of course every 6 months there's an email that goes out where you can upload new records, upload your medical medications and side effects and things like that. So this is critical. We currently now are working on trying to find money. We're going to be probably writing a grant here really soon to help fund the curation and hire a geneticist, a data analyst that's a geneticist to help us go through this and normalize this data. And so far we have 127 registrants, and but we only have 39 genetic reports, so we need more genetic reports in there. And this is a $3.6 million, and I have to say, as an organization leader and as a family member, this was the biggest win that we could have. I mean, this is just a huge win that if it wasn't for the parents doing the surveys on the sensory and the pain, this grant would have never been won, because that solidified the evidence of a prior study that Gavin Rumbaugh had and proved his theory, and he submitted that preliminary data along with several videos that I had and won this grant. So this is, you know, being a small organization, we could have never raised $3.6 million in the time that he needed to do this study, but with our data, we did it. And so all the families that participated, I want to thank you, because you did this. You helped us get there to do this, and this is so critical and so important. So basically, we have ways to collaborate, things that we do share data on. Typically, we are authoring publications as well, which builds credibility, both scientists and our patient organization. And I wanted to make you aware, of course, you know, through the group, we have the SYNGAP, the Splash for SYNGAP campaign that the SYNGAP Global Network is heading up. And we wanted to complement that initiative with a Twitter campaign using the Splash for SYNGAP and having the families also put their hashtag out. We're also going to be reaching out to some of the larger rare disease organizations to help us with that, to tweet and retweet, to get the awareness up through Twitter. So we hope that if you have a Twitter, that you will join us that day as well. your pictures and getting them to the Splash for SYNGAP Facebook page with the SYNGAP Global Network. So we're hoping that you can do that, and that's pretty much what my presentation is. And if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. I hope I didn't take up too much time.
Hi, Monica. So if anybody does have any questions about this presentation, you can follow up with Monica. We didn't slot a specific question period for this. But
okay, that's okay. Yeah, that's right.
All right. And without further ado, I'll pass the reins over to Dr. Jennifer Bain.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for letting me be a part of this great project. So I'm a pediatric neurologist. So what I'm going to try to do is piece together a little bit about the genetics that Monica already talked about and why SYNGAP1 actually affects a lot of the things that you guys are seeing. So I'm going to do really basic genetics 101. Please feel free to ask any questions either along the way or afterwards. Don't hesitate to interrupt. Okay, so there are more than 6 billion people on our earth, and what makes us all different? We all have 100 trillion cells. And how do these cells know what to do? What tells them to work together to keep your heart pumping, your brain thinking, your bones growing? And the answer lies in our genome. The DNA is part of our genome. It's contained within each one of those trillion cells, and it carries all the instructions needed to build and maintain all these different types of the body. If you could peer inside of each individual, we each have one genome, but within that genome, we know there's about 20,000 to 25,000 specific genes that we know of. So that's a lot of data that we have. We get about 23 of these chromosomes from mom. We get another 23 chromosomes from dad, and then it's passed down, and that's who we are. What's really important to understand that sometimes we think of genetic conditions running in families. So it runs from mom's side or it runs from dad's side. So not all genetic conditions run in families. There's a group of mutations or genetic conditions that we call de novo mutations. These are very common. They actually are commonly associated with children with neurodevelopmental problems. What's important to know here is that you didn't pass it on from mom, you didn't pass it on from dad. This is new or de novo. When do we get these de novo mutations? They can happen at a couple different places in our early development, in the egg, in the sperm, at or shortly after conception. Unfortunately, there's not really a way to know when it happens or how it happens, but I think it's very important, as you probably have encountered with conversations with genetic counselors, but the recurrence risk is very, very little, 1% in future pregnancy, because it's just run-of-the-mill, random odds. So as I mentioned before, every cell in the entire body has 46 genes. There are 22 paired chromosomes, and then the additional 2 chromosomes called the sex chromosomes. So here's a little picture. You can see each of the paired chromosomes, the 22 paired ones, and then you have either 2 X's or an X and a Y. What we're going to talk today is on chromosome 6. So you might be able to recognize this picture. This is from the Simons VIP website to show you that SYNGAP1 is a gene that's on the short arm or the P arm of the chromosome. And so that would be the genomic location of where it exactly is. The 21.32 just gives you a little more specificity exactly where the directions are to locate that gene. What's critical to understand here, and why does SYNGAP matter, is to kind of go back to what the big picture is. So if we look at the brain, there's trillions and billions of connections between the brains. Each one of these connections, if you think about two wires connecting, so here's one wire, there's the other wire, that connection right there is what we call a synapse. And in order for a signal to go from the brain down to the body, allow us to sense, to feel, to hear, you need to have all these connections working appropriately. So this is an even more cartoon-like picture, but you can see one nerve cell here is in the pink, the other nerve is in the blue, and in between this little gap is called the synapse. Isn't that funny? It's called SYNGAP1. It's very critical there. So it's incredibly important to recognize that science moves on, and every year we learn more and more and more about these synapses. So this is actually from 3 years ago, but you can see all the major players in this one nerve to another nerve looking at that synapse or that connection. And if we look really close down there at the bottom end of it, look at that right there, SYNGAP1. So SYNGAP1 is critical. It's one of those critical players in brain development. What's really important to understand is that SYNGAP1 provides these instructions for every single nerve cell in the entire brain. And it's particularly important during early brain development and even future cognitive ability. What we've learned from Simon's VIP, as well as many of these patient registries and longitudinal natural history studies, is that when individuals have problems with SYNGAP1, there are neurological problems that we might see, such as autism spectrum disorder, intellectual disability, developmental delay, epilepsy or seizures. Importantly, SYNGAP1 is not only in the brain, but it's also in the rest of the body as well. And so we can sometimes see other systemic effects, which is why we do sometimes see differences in facial features. As you were hearing about earlier today, the Face to Gene is a program or an app that hopefully will be able to look at these differences in facial features and say, you know what, let's think about SYNGAP1 for this individual. Perhaps that can help us target our treatment and target our identification earlier. And because the brain's involved, we often will have behavioral differences between these individuals. So, an update on the number of individuals who are involved in the Simon's VIP SYNGAP1 mutation registry. There are 16 total families, 13 of which have completed the medical history, thank you. 8 of these individuals are female, and the ages are between 2 and 15 years of age. As I mentioned, SYNGAP1 is a gene that has many different parts of it, and there's a long area in which different parts can be broken. And so these are all the different mutations that have been observed in the 16 different individuals. Each one of these little codes, ARG1240X, tells you what is actually changing, what in that genetic code is changing. And the number gives us the location, and the letters or the symbols give us a little bit more about what the change is. Out of the 12 individuals that completed the developmental and behavioral part of their medical history, we've noticed that several of the children have been diagnosed with or have concern for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. Some have been formally diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, or autism. One has unsteadiness in their walking, often called ataxia. Many have developmental delay. Most have intellectual disability. Most have language disorders or speech delays. And others have been noted to have obsessive compulsive disorder and a sensory processing disorder. From the medical history, as I mentioned, there are 13 individuals. I'm going to be reporting what they've told us about their children. 2 have been reported to have poor suck. 2 have low tone. We often call that hypotonia. Many have feeding difficulties. We have irritability noted, as well as being lethargic or fatigued or tired. Several have been noted to be clumsy. Many have low muscle tone, or that hypotonia. One has an abnormal movement disorder called tics. As I mentioned before, the whole crux of the problem is that SYNGAP1 is involved in the the connection between nerve cells, the synapse. And epilepsy or seizures is abnormal electrical activity in the brain that commonly occurs when there's some problem in that synapse or that connection between nerve cells. When you have this abnormal connection or synapse, you're at a higher risk to have abnormal electricity that leads to seizures. And so, not unsurprisingly, 11 of the children have been reported to have seizures. Seizures can be further subdivided or described based on what they look like or when they happen. For example, 2 of them only happen in the setting of fever. A grand mal seizure is when the whole body is shaking. A petit mal, which is seems to be more reported, is when you have a staring or a blank stare or decreased responsiveness. Spasm is typically a brief jerk-like movement. A drop attack is when your whole body loses tone and you basically fall over and drop. A simple partial might be while they're awake and alert and they have abnormal movements or uncontrolled movements. Vision problems, not unsurprisingly, which is noted when children do have brain problems, have been reported in several of the children. Amblyopia, meaning disconjugate gaze, where both of the eyes are not lined correctly and therefore the brain cannot process that information. Astigmatism, cortical blindness, farsighted, nystagmus or abnormal movements of the eyes. Ptosis is when there's weakness of the eyelids. Strabismus is similar to amblyopia, where you have disconjugate gaze. 2 of the children were reported to have reflux or heartburn. Many of the children have reported having ear infections, even requiring ear tubes, being at higher risk to have other infections such as pneumonia or urinary tract infections. Lung issues such as asthma or upper respiratory infections have been reported. Hypospadias is a genital issue that has been reported in males. Endocrinological issues such as failure to thrive, not gaining weight, difficulty gaining weight, and short stature has been noted in 3 children, both of which have both problems, failure to thrive and short stature. 1 child is noted to have a bone issue with an extra finger, while another is noted to have scoliosis. And many of the children have had different surgeries. A vagus nerve stimulator is a surgery that you would have to help control seizures. Dental surgery, hernia surgery, hypospadias repair, ear tubes, adenoidectomy, a tonsilloidectomy, an extra digit being removed, other musculoskeletal surgeries, and eye surgeries. 3 children have reported having eczema, while another has extremely soft or silky skin. Looking a little bit more about the different types of medications that individuals are using, and this is based on 11 individuals. 10 of the 11 are on medication to help control their seizures. 3 children are on medication for ADHD, attention hyperactivity deficient disorder, 1 of which is using a stimulant medication, while 2 other ones are using non-stimulant medication. 2 of the children are reported to having behavioral issues. And surprisingly, actually, only 3 are reported to have sleep needs where they use a medication. In terms of many of the children having epilepsy or seizures, it's really important for us to look at what people are using and what seems to be working. There's over a dozen medications for seizures out there, and so appreciating what might work best for this group of individuals is really critical. 2 children are using a medication called lamotrigine, also known as Lamictal. 1 is using a medication called valproic acid, which is also called Depakote or Depakine. 1 is using a medication called clonazepam or Klonopin. 1 uses ethosuximide or Zerontin. And a cousin to clonazepam is clobazam or Frisium. Looking at the developmental milestones for children who all have SYNGAP1 mutation, there does seem to be 100% of the children are walking. However, it is slightly delayed. ranging from 14 to 26 months of age, on average 19.6 months. More than half of the children are using at least single words. The range for these first words can be delayed anywhere from 12 months to 54 months, with an average age of first words for 31 months. In terms of toilet training, we're using toilet training to define both bowel and bladder. The ages were pretty much the same for both, but in general, the toilet training age was between 36 and much older, so 60 months was about the age. So in summary, it's not uncommon in this group of individuals to have SYNGAP1 mutations that are associated with increased risk of seizures, developmental delay or intellectual impairment, language impairment, vision problems, low muscle tone or hypotonia, feeding problems with a poor suck, and motor delays with regards to their walking. But it is certainly attainable based on the information that we have. It's critical to realize that the SYNGAP1 gene is critical for brain function. Without it, you certainly will have difficulties or neurological problems during development and during later life. Thank you. I hope that helped. Any questions?
And if anyone on the line has questions for Jen, you can unmute yourself and ask them now. Otherwise, feel free to chat me. All right, just a few more seconds in case anyone might be typing out a chat, and then if not, we can move on to the next presentation. Okay, so I'm gonna pass the reins over then to Barbara Haas-Givler, who can go ahead and give her talk. Barb, you may be muted. We're not getting any audio.
I unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yep.
I was waiting till you passed the reins over to me. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. As I said, my background is an educator, and I'm also a board-certified behavior analyst, and I work with many children in many different capacities, from being a classroom teacher, preschool, through a regular ed and special ed teacher, special ed supervisor, and then most recently more of a consultant and working here at Geisinger ADMI, providing trainings and really getting to do almost all the things I like to do, but they're all around children and adults with special needs. So without further ado, the title is The ABCs of Effective Strategies to Support Behavior and Communication. And first of all, I'd like the ABCs of what these alphabet letters stand for, and what does ABA stand for. And many people hear that this term, and ABA stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis. Applied means that these interventions that are used with individuals, children, and adults are used in natural settings, and the behaviors that are targeted are significant for the person's social and day-to-day living. The behavioral means that the interventions are based on behavioral principles, and they're evidence-based, and they have a scientific base. The analysis piece is that your decisions that you're doing in your treatment or your interventions are based on ongoing data collection. So in the beginning, you would do a baseline data, and from there, periodic data collection and analysis to see if what you're doing is really going on a trend towards success. ABA, and I always think it's easier almost to explain what it's not, and it's not just for special education. And ABA is not one program. It's really like a toolbox that inside of it has many tools that you will hear about when you are in different school programs or therapeutic intervention settings. ABA is not just for schools or therapy sessions. When you think of Weight Watchers, bonuses in work, those are based on either positive reinforcement and a structure, and so therefore, bonuses and even smoking cessation is based on principles of behavior. When I think about ABA, when it comes to communication and when it comes to behavior and working with students, I think, why is it so helpful? And it's because ABA bases itself on things such as task analysis, breaking something down into its smallest parts so that you can teach basic pieces, and then we talk about forward chaining. We can add on things as we go along, or we can start with the end in mind and then work with backward chaining. So it's different ways that we might teach skills and tasks to our children. Could be things such as how to eat, how to communicate, how to toilet train, how to make a sandwich. These things are broken down in their small parts so we can reinforce and teach specifically the task. Positive reinforcement is a big component, and this is something that I'm a firm believer in, is the positive reinforcement that we really need to figure out. And when children are not as verbal and have more complex challenges, it's really sometimes hard to figure out what are the reinforcers or what are the reinforcers that are available for that child or adult. We also think firmly about the structure and the supports. What do we do in the environment to structure and set the person up to succeed? What supports does that person need in order to be successful and to access the things that a teacher is trying to teach or a parent's trying to teach? ABA talks a lot about creating MOs, or that motivating operation. So I always think about that as deprivation creates motivation. So when you're thirsty, water or a drink is very motivating. When you're hungry, a little snack is very motivating. And the converse is true. So if a child is full, like they were not going to be motivated by that snack that you're preparing for them. Schedules of reinforcement are also very important. How frequent you give that reinforcement, and how do you fade that needing that constant reinforcement from every activity the child does. We'll talk about that as we go forward. What's very important too is, in having been a behavior specialist and a BC board certified behavior analyst working in the home of many children, is also generalization to the naturally occurring reinforcement. So I can sit in the home and I can teach a child about turn taking, but then when we get on the playground, does that generalize? When the child is in the school or in a activity, do they understand and do they access the reinforcement of the child? I can have the child answer or show the sign or give a picture that indicates their name, but if a child comes up to them on a playground and says, hey, what's your name? We need to make sure that that child generalizes that skill so that they can get that natural reinforcement from the other child. Data collection and analysis, as I mentioned before, is very important. Not too much, though. I always think, it's like save time for teaching and for working with the children, but we need just the right amount and what we need to understand about what's going on with what we're trying to do, and maybe why is it working or why isn't it working. First thing I love to say, too, is that behavior is not all bad. So, of course, as a behavior specialist or a consultant, when I go into a school, the first thing people do is want to give me a pile of data and say, look at all the behaviors this person did. Well, behavior is not all bad, all right? So what we see is behaviors on the left here, pointing to an object or a picture, taking an adult's hand to a desired item, handing a picture to an adult, following directions, washing your hands, reading a story. Those are all behaviors. They're the behaviors we want to see. Conversely, I'm getting information about challenging behaviors. The child is screaming or yelling, crying, putting objects in their mouth, destroying materials, jumping, pushing away items, running away, or spinning objects. So these are the behaviors that are often called, we want to address. That being said, behavior is caused. It's observable. So we do have private behaviors such as anxiety, and we might be very anxious about something or fearful, but what we have to do is look at the outside, and if the person's not as verbal, potentially figure out what is this outside symptom that we see that's observable of that behavior that's internal. So we believe in, if we're hungry, maybe on the outside you don't see that you're hungry, but you see that I'm reaching for food, or I'm giving you a picture for food. Behavior is communication. So oftentimes the parents will say, well, I don't know how he's doing. And I said, well, how is he doing with school? Is he getting on the bus happily in the morning and coming home? And it's like, that is communication as well. How you approach something, that is communication. Behavior serves a function, and there's a reason why a person does something. Sometimes it's hard to figure out, and that's when, if it was so simple, you wouldn't be challenged by it, but the function of the behavior isn't usually the problem. So if I'm thirsty or hungry, there's nothing wrong with that function. But me grabbing your food or grabbing your water, that is a problem behavior, and that's challenging. Or I'm taking food from the tray of the student next to me. The same behavior, if you have a limited repertoire of behaviors, you might use that same reaching behavior to reach to show something or to reach to take something. So we have to figure it out and really just find out what the function is. The thing about challenging or problem behavior that I feel it's so concerning is that it interferes with learning new skills. So the important thing is we want to have a child that's assessing the information as much as they can during the day. So I'm a firm believer in the antecedent, or setting the child up to succeed. And the other thing about challenging or problem behavior I always concerned about is when I go to a school, if I see my child, my student, or my client, I don't want them to be isolated from other children. So it's not just that I don't think their behavior is appropriate. It is a problem behavior because other children are going to be not wanting to be with my student if he's engaging in those behaviors. So what oftentimes is a behavior specialist is called in, or a school psychologist. If the children are in school programs, would be a FBA, and it's a functional behavior assessment. And what the important thing is to identify what is this challenging or inappropriate behavior. And very much it should be described very clearly, such as, swiping materials off of a table, hitting hand to face, biting, whatever those behaviors might be, eloping, running out of the classroom. What we might think is the function. So we might think that every time we bring out an activity that the person doesn't like, they will swipe it off the table. But this is still our hypothesis. What we're also seeing is that to me, I'll go into a school and I'll say, can you tell me 3 things the child might be doing and they would not be engaging in this behavior? So if you can tell me those 3 things, that could be very important. What also is the strategies for alternatives or replacement behavior. So as we're doing this FBA, we're starting to, where it's a process, it's an ongoing process. It's usually not once and done. But what is happening is that the teacher, the parents, the OT, PT, everyone's around this child is saying, this child really does want to communicate. I believe that's what's happening. When this child is running to the door, she turns around and looks. I think she wants me to chase her. I think she wants my attention. So these are the things we're thinking is, the child may be doing for these behaviors, but what would be the alternative or replacement? We should be thinking of those things. So would it be providing a break card? Would it be a MAC switch that the child that says, take a walk? Those would be the strategies for a replacement for eloping. We're also thinking of the consequences that won't maintain these inappropriate behaviors. This is important too. What is happening after the behavior is reinforcing, whether it be escaping or it is accessing. The FBA outcomes will be a behavior plan or intervention or treatment plan oftentimes. Strategies will be developed by the team. We want it very important, and that's where, having worked with many children with underlying genetic conditions that are the causal of their intellectual disability or their autism spectrum or behavior disorders, is identifying these medical conditions. So in one group that I work with, they have sleep inversion. So we really need the staff and the family and everyone working with that child to understand that. Or if the child has GI issues, or the child is on medication for seizures, as many of the students may be, your children. So we might see that this child has chronic constipation or loose bowels. We need to understand those things. Really important is to identify positive reinforcers. thinking about the next thing is the environmental changes to minimize triggers. Now, I'm not saying we can get rid of all triggers in the environment, but if we want to help the child to be able to learn what we're presenting, we need to, in those times, minimize those triggers. Once again, that data analysis and revisions are important. So functions of behavior, we do things to get things. We want to get attention, we want to get objects, we want to get an activity, we want to move, we might want to get sensation. So we're thinking we want to do things to gain things. The other part of behavior is we want to get rid of things. We don't want attention. We don't want the objects presented. We don't like the sensory. We don't like the activity. So those could be the causes of the functions. When we think of ABCs of behavior, we talk about antecedent, which happens before the behavior, the actual behavior, and then consequence, what happens afterwards. Antecedents are what happens immediately before the behavior, but in some cases it could also be a slow trigger. But what triggered the behavior? So it could be a person, a place, activity, a sound, a smell, a demand, a request, or limited access, which I know that Monica and I had a conversation that, you know, sometimes we have some issues with not being able to have immediate access to an activity or an item. There are also slow triggers, and I often think about the students that I support that oftentimes kids may be holding things in, or something happened earlier in the day, and then it may be that the child at lunchtime, that one more demand, it looks like it was a quick trigger, but really there had been a slow triggers all day long. That person had been tired or holding things in or hungry, and then it seemed like it was a more delay. The establishing motivations or the motivating operations, we think about if you're hungry, you're thirsty, you're in pain, or you're tired, those things motivate you to get things or to get rid of things. So I always want to think about those things when I'm working. I think about the child in the middle and all of these things that may be setting events or happening in that moment in time for that child. Behaviors, what we think about is what we're seeing on the outside. It should be written. I know that I've gone to schools and I've sat in the back of the classroom while a paraprofessional or an aide or a therapeutic staff were taking data, and I was told that the data they were collecting was that the child was off task. Well, that was kind of broad, off task. How do I know the person's off task? So I just went with the flow of it, and I looked at my data compared to the person's data. We were totally different. So what we went back to the drawing board and said, we best describe this more carefully. So is it that the child is writing the responses? Is he raising his hand? Is he sitting in the chair? So we might have to come up with different ways to observe and record. Collecting those data to make the decisions. And the consequence, now it's not to say when I think about antecedents or so more setting the kids up, the consequences are going to always be there. And that is what happens after the behavior. And the consequences are not all bad. Sometimes I'll go to a classroom and the staff will say, well, he's got to learn to accept his consequences. Well, gaining access to the reward or the toy they wanted, that was a consequence. Getting attention was the consequence. But I think that many times we think of some words with what we think of as consequences are take the consequences of your behavior. It includes things such as corrective feedback, like right, good job. Or for some of the students that I work that are very sensitive to any type of correction, if you just say something simple like, no, wrong, it isn't that, could you try again? They may, in fact, be triggered by that because they don't like to be wrong. There was consequences. They're not all bad, and they occur after the behavior. Reinforcement is something we talk about when we're coming up with learning, teaching programs and behavior management, behavior change. And reinforcement basically comes after the behavior, but it is something that if it's working, the behavior should be going up. It should be increasing. Minimally, it should stay maintaining. So reinforcing for some children would be attention. For others, it could be stickers. For some, in some schools, they may use tokens that they can earn, rewards, prizes, games, access to extra time on an iPad for some children. But what oftentimes is reinforcing is escape or avoidance. Because I engage in a certain behavior, and I swipe all those materials off the table, or I cry and protest, and you remove that child, the toy or the demand, the request, and then if the request is taken away, then that person is reinforced for engaging in that behavior. That being said, we need to practice the appropriate behaviors and find those replacements, because you just don't get rid of a behavior. We need to find another really equivalent behavior that's going to gain us what we want. So I think about reinforcers, and I always talk about the mixed nuts. And reinforcers change over time, they change over value. And for example, when my husband and I buy a can of mixed nuts, I immediately like to eat the cashews. And when the cashews are gone, I then will work on some almonds. Then next I might go to pistachios, and on, because it's the availability of those reinforcers. So we as parents or teachers or therapists have some control over some reinforcers, not all, but if we set things up in the right way, we can increase the value by the availability, and these things will shift over time. I think about children that I work with, I think about their interests are possible reinforcers. It's not always the case, and it's just a matter of the value, how much is it worth for me? I really want that Dora video, but is it worth it for me to sit in a chair and do, talk, say 5 things, or try to tie my shoes, or try to hold a spoon properly? But I always think about a child's interests are usually a good place to start for reinforcers. We sometimes use edibles, meaning primary food reinforcers, and really what I try to do, as always, is really pairing positive reinforcement, praise, attention, not just giving items or edibles, but sometimes you are limited as to what motivates the child, and at the end of the day, giving very small edible reinforcers may work for some children, but you want to shift them over potentially. Interests are, for some of the younger or young adults, might be a trip to go to bowling, or some of our young adults that I work with have really enjoyed going and socializing at a Starbucks, ordering a coffee because they feel like they've enjoyed their day, and they're like, it's feeling like they're grown up like to their parent. Sometimes it's the time on the iPads or iPhones as well. I think of a child's interest, and sometimes when working with children who have autism spectrum, they have some unusual interests, and we don't necessarily want to encourage those interests, but if that's what the person is interested in, I try to take that and morph it into something more appropriate. How can I work and change and shape this into something more appropriate, so to speak? So these represent a young boy that I worked with. He had loved ceiling fans, he loved string, and he liked power lines. I mean, going in this one neighborhood in Lehigh Valley, that for him was like he went on a trip to Disney because there were so many power lines. That being said, there was a theme that he would like things, and the other thing he really loved was water, and he frequently asked about water. So unlike many other children with autism who like pictures or visuals, he really didn't like books. So what I decided to do was they call it pairing with reinforcers, meaning having yourself associated with something, or taking something that the person likes and associating it with something else that might be something not as interesting. So I went ahead and I found this book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt. And in the book, there is water. So over time, this young boy who would not look at books, had no interest in books, but loved water, would sit and listen to the book, and got to the point where then he would ask to look at the book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt. That being said, later on, I'll talk a little bit about keeping these powerful reinforcers, because if they don't have that many reinforcers to work with, so when I would go to the homes of 3 to 4 children at a time, I'd have a different bag for each child, and I asked the parents and the grandmother of this child, I said, please let me have this, because I don't have that many things that he really likes to, do with me. So I would keep my Going in a Bear Hunt book. So one day, months later, I'm at his grandmother's house, and he looks at me, he goes, Going on a bear hunt? And I said, yes, I'll get the book out soon. He goes, closet. And I said, do you have one in your closet? And there we found out. Granny had snuck and bought him the book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt. So we can't control everything, but keeping that powerful reinforcer for him was so important for us. Punishment, I'm not as firm a believer in punishment. It's usually only effective when the punisher is present. In some cases, I've had some children that what you would think of as punishment was really rewarding. So timeout, if I have a child that really doesn't like a lot of attention, I had a young boy whose parents would send him to his room for timeout, and he really didn't like attention, so it really wasn't timeout from what he liked, and it really wasn't punishing because he could go to his room and look at books, which he loved, and they were, you know, it was something that he really enjoyed. And when we think about correction, putting things back where they belong, as I said, I'm not as firm a believer, because I think that if you can set the child up and reinforce, then I think that's more powerful. So when we're talking these ABCs of behavior, oftentimes in schools and in programs, historically have seen people working on the consequences, so that you have sticker charts and you're earning things. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things, but I'm saying many children that I work with need the stages set up so that they can get to those consequences. So front loading it, lots of antecedent strategies to support the child so they can practice the appropriate behaviors and get to those consequences. So in the beginning of time of when I'm working with a child, or if I go to a school and do a consult, I'll say, you know, let's think about this. Is it the child can't do it? Is it that they won't do it? What are realistic current expectations? What are attainable goals? And what is the motivation? Is the child motivated for those things? Or if the child isn't, if it's important, how can we shift it? And what supports are necessary? And I often think, too, something very important is that you can control, what can you do to set up the person to succeed? Well, you can control many things. You can control your behavior. That being said, in a school, you can't control, or in your home, potentially sometimes you can't control the other children, in the sense that if you're trying to ignore some behavior, you can control the schedule of when things are available and what's happening in what order. Reinforcers, the availability of them. That being said, unless it's the person engages in more self-stimulatory behaviors, and that person is then more control of their own reinforcement. The reinforcement schedule, how often? So in the beginning, when we're learning a new skill, we really want it to be very rich. We want the child to get reinforcement every time they ask for something. If we're trying to get vocabulary, if we got a word, any approximation in the beginning, we're going to reinforce it. Then as the child can really has that under his belt, then we might want to have it shaped up a little bit better and maybe have it more clear. That being said, then intermittent reinforcement is the most powerful, but in the beginning we may have to really see what that child needs in terms of their reinforcement. I think about that about toilet training oftentimes, even with typical children. You know, we have all this fanfare around the toileting and we're so happy and it's a big celebration, and then the child's toilet trained and then we quickly forget to give any reinforcement. Oh great, you just went to the bathroom. Then we start seeing toileting accidents. Well, we may need to go back to the beginning and start giving a little bit more reinforcement again. The available materials, I know that in the school versus in a home, it's much easier to maintain the materials that you need and possibly put some less out of reach. Planning breaks, as important, because many children who have low tone really need planned breaks to get up and move, even if it's just to do an errand in the school or get up and put something on the board, pick up some materials and help organize the blocks in the block area. But also we have to really, a response to we have to teach a child to ask for a break and really respond to the appropriate break requests. We can control some of the physical environment. How do we, we don't want a child in a classroom by a noisy heater or by very distracting fish tanks if they have them, or gerbil, cages. Structure and routine is very important, and that's very important for us, and especially if you're for our children, if you're trying to learn something in the beginning, we don't want to become too rigid, but in the beginning, if we do things in a certain order till we really can get them under our belt and they're almost automatic, then it's much easier on that child to be able to remember, and it gets more to their long-term memory. The ABCs of communication. So what I think is really important, and Monica had mentioned about some, some communication concerns, and also some, it's not as behavioral a term, but meltdown. We all know what a meltdown looks like, and it's pretty much usually crying, throw himself to the ground, protest, maybe, hitting on themselves or on the ground. But when you think of it in this life and world, everyone needs an acceptable way to protest things and request. I always feel like as a behaviorist, I always think about myself, and I think about our parents. We're saying we have ways to avoid things we don't like. We have ways to protest, to rearrange our schedule to some extent, whereas our children or the students that I work with don't have potentially these skill sets. So this to me is a main key of why we're seeing some behavior concerns, is communication. Many times too, we say once a person gets more functional communication, we see a decrease in the inappropriate behaviors. So the first thing is to start with a comprehensive, and I like to think of transdisciplinary assessment. So we have a team looking at the person all around to look at motor, to look at oral skills. We look at our ability to articulate, our ability to communicate, our interest in communication. So from educators, behavior, parent, OT, PT, speech, all people can really work and contribute to a comprehensive assessment. From there, we can set realistic goals and expectations. And they should be attainable so that we can celebrate them. And they should be realistic and building blocks. So I think about, there are many programs out there, and thinking about some children that I've worked with previously in the 70s and 80s, there was more of a focus on, vocabulary, so getting labels of things, naming things. Well, if you have a child that has hundreds of labels but really never asks for water when they're thirsty, there's a concern. So really what we want is looking at realistic goals and goals that are going to be building blocks and pivotal to learning others. Identifying those reinforcers and conducting a preference assessment. There are some videos on YouTube even of staff at Vanderbilt doing a preference assessment. So if I didn't want to take that time during our meeting, but you can take a look at it yourselves, and basically it would show, there's different ways to do it, but basically it should be systematic. So I might have bubbles, and I might have a beanbag, and I might have a helicopter and a gummy bear. And I say, which one? Make a pick. Choose which way that child would choose. And then I write down what they choose compared to other things. And from that, we can get a good sense of the preferences. And like I said, these things change over time, and they're not like once and done. We all change what we like, and different times a year we like different things as well. In the beginning, reinforcing all attempts at communication with a variety of reinforcers, as I said. So you may use a little bit of edibles, you may use praise, it might be bubbles, it might be lifting the person up and giving them some nice movement, or in a swing. Sometimes I've done times, like in a swing, each time the child came up to me in a swing and I pushed them back, we would have like a good back and forth to communicate. But giving that reinforcement as well as communication. We may need to teach children how to learn. Are they really able to access what we're trying to present? So I think that's very important. Expectations of, it's not a Norman Rockwell sitting in a chair, hands on knees, folded to learn. That being said, we need some level of attention. So for some children, it might be on their stomachs with a bolster, with the materials in front of them. For others, it is at a table. It's very individual. But behavior is communication, and communication is behavior. So these are some strategies. The target might be to communicate rather than run away, resort to aggression, or shut down, or have a meltdown. Communication may be verbal, gestural, sign language, picture exchange, or an assistive technology device. The strategies could be including a functional communication training, which would be teaching the child to request, and the AAC, which we'll go over in a few minutes, the augmentative alternative communication. What's important with communication, too, is the parent or the staff noting that the child is getting frustrated, and try to interrupt if there's a behavioral chain and you know that the child starts with a certain noise or stomp a foot, and then you know the next thing might be, it might escalate, and then interrupt that, engage them in an appropriate communication or activity, and reinforce so that they're not getting to that heightened level. Communication skills need to be practiced and rehearsed all different times, places, and with adults during the day, and children as well. I had a learning lesson from a student I work with, and oftentimes as a behavior person, if you're in the home, like I was in the home like 4 to 5 hours a week with staff, and the young girl I was supporting, if I was present in her classroom or her preschool when we were having her included, the teacher would ask her a question and she would look to me for me to answer. So I had to teach myself to not be the person responding, but to encourage her to be responding. When we think about these AAC or augmentative alternative devices, they're unaided. So oftentimes a child's facial expression, their vocalization, gesture, or sign language are unaided, meaning that the person can do that without any other devices. When we think about aided devices, we think about these low-tech, which would be like a pencil, paper, alphabet boards, pictures and photos. We have single message voice output. That's that red button. It's a Mac switch. So you can record it with one word. It was, we had this one young girl. It was, she was eloping quite a bit, like going to the classroom door and running. And she was in a typical kindergarten, included there. She was nonverbal. And what we wanted to do was teach her an appropriate way to take a walk because she wanted movement. And we gave her this Mac switch and we recorded, break please. And you can record it with a child's voice or an adult's voice. And what we noticed that she was picking it every 2 minutes. So we had to say, take a walk, please. And then sometimes we had to put the switch out of reach or cover it so that she didn't think she could have a break every 2 minutes. But that gave her a voice. It was much more appropriate than her getting up out of her chair and running to the door. Mid-technology would be these fixed display speech generating devices, and this is the GoTalk. Then we have a higher tech, which would be the dynamic display speech generating devices, and the iPad can be also used with different technology. What's really important too is though, sometimes it's not just the technology, it's that it's the right fit for the child. Just because a school has Proloquo and iPad, that child that might be it really has to be assessed whether or not that child can utilize that and understand that device or can isolate a finger. So there's a place too when we talk about that transdisciplinary approach. What we think about is we have the OT now can work on isolating a finger to point. So if it was at this fixed display speech device, which only has like 9 icons there, it's much more readily available than a big field of very small icons for the student, the child. The fast facts about AAC are many strategies and tools are appropriate for toddlers and preschoolers, which is really interesting because even myself, I always felt that it seemed to be that the schools were saying that we needed to wait till the children were older. Basically, when we're here, we do a lot of, my speech therapist does an AAC evaluation, and what she will do is trial some different programs and boards, and in the beginning also, the photo displays are oftentimes more engaging. So in fact, she has a photo display. This is like a lunch tray, but she has a photo display of available toys that are in our clinic. So she will show the toy, see that the child wants the toy first of all, and then she will teach the child and see if the child can learn that one-to-one correspondence, that if he pushes this and points to this, then he gets access. So, and these are some children that are really functioning at a toddler or preschool level. There are no prerequisite skills required. AAC strategies do not prevent a child from learning how to talk, and that's one I think that's very important. I know that for years with manual language or total communication, oftentimes people were like, oh, I'm afraid to teach my child signs, he won't talk, but many children, as soon as they did get some words, the signs went away. AAC strategies provide the visual supports that really might aid, and that's a big piece, is if the child's comprehension is higher, and they're really frustrated because they want to tell you so much more, then it'll help on comprehension, because then you can be working on these skills concurrently with working on the production of using it as a communication device. What's really important too is, well, two things before about the AAC devices too, is that we sometimes have children that will use different systems for different locations. And I know for some children, using natural gestures instead of like articulated sign is something what they do in the beginning, but the concern would be, as you would feel as well, is that would anybody else understand if they have their own sign for water, no one else would know what it is. So you might have the child using some gestures in your home and might use a picture exchange communication system at school, or use a Proloquo or a different iPad with some type of a speech device, generating device. The important thing we often suggest too is that if you're going to use it on an iPad, that the child have a designated iPad for communication, because there's nothing worse than a child that has that they want to take the iPad and look at a favorite video, and we are not restricting it, so it's easier for the child. There are programs that you can block out internet access and block out all the other programs. That being said, for our children that don't make the connection as well, it's probably easier to have one that's a fun and it's in a different case, and it looks different, like one's purple and one's orange, so it's very different, and it's used, for communication. So I think about the dangling carrot and capturing and contriving motivation. So some activities that parents can do, and I've always, done it, when I say find the right fit, we don't want to frustrate. We want just to motivate, just to have it just that slightly out of reach, but attainable. So placing a snack or a toy in a clear container with a tighter lid. Now, many of our kids are really quick at opening and getting access to these things, but if you have something that the child or the adult needs to ask for help, so you've captured and you've contrived that motivation. We as teachers, even I've worked in preschool for many years with many children that were language delayed or nonverbal, and we as teachers were quick to figure out what the child wanted. We got to know our children the way they walked over to the bathroom door, didn't ask, but we knew that meant that they had a wet diaper or needed to go to the bathroom. We knew that when they reached towards a bottle of water, they were thirsty. So, but what we need to do is capture and contrive the motivation to give more opportunities. And so sometimes placing the shoes or the jacket slightly out of reach, or putting one shoe by the door. If you always have your shoes by the door and the child's motivated to get out the door and go play in the yard or go out and go on the ride in the car, just placing the shoes maybe in a slightly different place to capture this question, like where is it? Identifying those powerful reinforcers and limiting that access. And having gone to many people's homes, there's so many, the basements of many of our children look like a full school treatment program. And what I say is take some bins and call them bin A or B. And what we can do is then circulate them, because deprivation creates some motivation. If you haven't seen it for a while, it becomes new again. Providing those small portions of a snack or pieces of a play set. So I think about some of the Fisher-Price, there's a little camper with all the little guys. So, rather than give all of those things at once, I might give one and then have one slightly out of reach. So the child, I'm reinforcing the child to actually look at me, to ask, depending on what their communication is. But motivation to communicate, you can request with your eyes by looking at someone and looking back at the item. So I want to reinforce those kind of things and shape them into more higher level communication. Toys that need new batteries. So many of our children, I'll be here testing kids at Geisinger, and I'll hear, like broke, fix. I know what they mean. The batteries they need new batteries. So things that are slightly not working, or needs another piece. There's lots of ways to do these things, but finding that just right fit and the right timing. children learn through play. So play is the children's work. And if our children are somewhat delayed and we have that assessment, we know that they're socially at a younger age, communication might be at a younger age, we don't, we want to kind of meet them where they are and help raise up to a higher level and use what they like to teach the things that they need next. So turn taking is very simple. When I have bubbles and you blow, I blow, or I hold the wand, I let you hold the wand. Giving one of the trains on the train track. Maybe I don't give Thomas, I just give the other train. I might get the person looking at me like, where's Thomas? And then I can reinforce that communication. I might have a photo of Thomas, and that would be the way I would teach picture exchange. Reinforcing the brief periods of waiting. I think it's very difficult working with children. I work with many kids that are very impulsive, very short attention span, and I feel that sometimes I get heightened up. I get it because I'm responding to that high level of hyperactivity or impulsivity. So by reinforcing brief periods of waiting, not, a 1 minute could be an hour for one of our children, but very brief wait, and teaching that it's coming. It's not never coming. Count to 3. I have kids that don't know how to count, and they see me put up 3 fingers. I go 3, 2, 1, and then done. Reinforcing looking at others. There's a program for Joint Attention Jasper, and it's like for parents, teaching parents how to reinforce eye contact in a natural way. Reinforcing requesting, my turn, your turn, which is sometimes very difficult for children to understand that. So when we're playing these games, it's a natural way to teach that vocabulary. I often have worked with parents in working with them to set up some play dates. So having children, other children from the school that I might have met the parent might have met another parent and felt that the kids were near the same interest level, and we would just have a play date. And it would be with plan and structure. So it would be, one family, we did the story, If You Give a Moose a Muffin. We did that, the book. We made muffins. We played a few games. It was like an hour, just enough, the right amount of time, but encouraging play and understanding play with other children from their school, or social engineering kids from the school or kids from your community. I oftentimes too, if I have some children have restricted interests, I might make a list or put the names of things in a hat. So this was playing Wii, but the other child really didn't want to play Wii. They wanted to go outside. So we would put play Wii, go outside, have a snack. We would put that on our schedule. The ABCs of behavioral challenges, I think oftentimes the end of the earth as we know it, when a child, and it's like, well, why? Why are we seeing those things? And I think about potentially how the child is feeling is, I want it and I don't want to wait. Maybe I don't have a way to ask for what I want. I have a short attention span and you're taking too long. And it's quicker to grab something than to ask for it. Even if you think about in a classroom, a teacher with children raising their hands, the child that grabs something from the toy bin might get that item much faster than the child that's sitting, waiting, raising their hands. So we have to make sure that we are getting to the end that we want. We have to teach the child a different way to get something quicker. I don't think I'll ever get it back. And I think that's sometimes with children that have difficulty with even, that's sometimes difficult about using a toy as a reinforcer, because then when we give it, then we take it back and it feels like maybe they weren't ready to give it up, or they think they're never getting it back. I often found too is with children, if the child wants a cookie, so they're saying cookie, 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 and then you say, no, you can't have a cookie now, but you can have it after dinner. Well, all they heard was no. So oftentimes I'll say, you will get a cookie after dinner. That's a part of that also. I don't think I'll ever get this. I'll never get it back. You don't understand what I want. So I've been trying to tell you, but you don't get what I'm asking for. That's often a problem. Or I don't understand what you want of me. I've had that with a little boy that he would say, I'll behave. And I'll say, what does that mean? He goes, I'll be good. It's a circle. No one said behaving meant sitting in your chair or picking up your coat off the floor. The others is I don't want it, which I know that, Monica, we talked about it. Sometimes I want it, and I don't want to wait with more. But sometimes if we are presenting the same thing too many times to our children because they maybe didn't get it to mastery as a teacher, I had a professor at one of my courses say, if you gave me that same 5-piece puzzle for the last 5 years, I would break it and throw it at you too. Maybe you need to find some things that are more motivating or more interesting or more appropriate at their level. I don't know how to do it is oftentimes a problem. It's that mismatch. I think about this iron. I put this in here to remind me to say, strike when the iron is cold. When it comes to teaching things such as eating, we don't teach a child good manners when they're ravenous. We might want to wait until after they've had much of their lunch, and then we would work on, if it's eating soup with a spoon, we might put extra crackers in the soup and then give an adapted spoon, and then they take 1 or 2 of the bites. We don't want the child, we don't teach a child how to get dressed when the bus is pulling up. That being said, that's even with the frustration of wanting access to things, we might have to teach accepting no or accepting wait. And those are things that it has to be done systematically, and it's practiced just as any other thing, but it can be done. I had a little girl that I was working with that didn't like the word no, and she was quite verbal, and she always wanted my pen. And so what we did was one day I took markers, pens, crayons, all kinds of writing utensils, and I put them in a bowl in front of her, and my pen was right there, so she saw it. And I practiced with her. She said, I want your pen, because my pen had more value because it was mine, and she didn't have access to it. So I said, well, you can't have this, but you can have the green marker. So we went over and over, and we practiced it. So it became very comfortable with her. Transition. So transition is difficult for many children who have some challenges, and I think transition can be difficult for many of us as well, for adults. But when I started really getting down to the nitty-gritty, transition is everywhere. It's all day long. So you have different ways you have transition. You have transition from place to place, activity to activity, from person to person, for preferred to non-preferred. And in that case, it could be, you can keep going, right? Activity or place or person. And I've had children that have difficulty even from preferred to preferred because it's a change. So some of the strategies I found very, very successful, and it's like a visual schedule with sometimes it's the actual items, sometimes it's with pictures like and sometimes photographs. And I never underestimate the value of printed words. I have a young boy that I just saw that's 14 that is nonverbal, except for maybe a handful of words, but he absolutely reads his printed schedule. Had to make me a believer. I looked at it and I said, oh, where's gym? He pointed right to it on a printed page. Where's bathroom? He pointed right to it. So sometimes kids, and if they can enjoy the printed word, then let's use it. Sometimes transitions are helped by having a job. So I've had some children that really had difficulty. They loved school and they loved going home and they loved their homes, but the transition from the school out of the classroom to leave at the end of the day was difficult. So what we did was we created jobs. They have to be somewhat realistic and natural. So assistant to the bus monitor, giving a note, delivering things, attendance on difficult things such as fire drills. My student that I worked with that had difficulty with that, and I understood why, his job was to take attendance at the fire drill, which he loved, and with his favorite staff. Preferred items or fidget toys as distractors and transition items in some cases. And I say individual basis because if they become more distracting, then that's not appropriate. Or on the bus, if a child has an item and throws it, it could be dangerous. So we have to really think about what we're allowing as a fidget toy. But sometimes what we can do is, so I had a little girl that liked Dora. So we didn't want her having her big Dora doll coming with her every day, but she didn't like stickers at that point yet. So what we did was we had a little Dora charm that we put on her backpack. So that was enough for her. She could fidget with that even when she was on the bus. Nonverbal cues or manual sign are very, very helpful for transition, because also you're not constantly talking and or actually giving that emotionality in your voice. So if the child can recognize their schedule, or you could point to the schedule, or if you have a sign that says later or soon, depending on your child, that to me can be very good. Pre-specified reinforcers, 2-minute warnings. Also, what's very important is rehearsing the change-ups, all right? Because no two things are going to be exactly the same. So on that schedule, we put surprise. There might be a change. These are ones that have been used for physical or verbal, minimizing those triggers, recognizing those symptoms, interrupting. That neutral, no-nonsense manner when correcting is very important. We're not robotics, but do not give the emotionality. When a person is anxious, upset, in the middle of this, we need to be the voice of calm. The preferred staff being assigned, oftentimes during demanding activities or in difficult settings. Following directions, and you can read through these. You'll be getting the PowerPoint. Lindsay will be sending them out. But I often think about following directions. Practice with positive requests. Give me high five. Here, go get a cookie. Do things that are positive, not just doing difficult tasks. Allowing for a possible delay. Some children take some time. Nonverbal reminders. Can you help with is oftentimes a very big motivator for children. Preferred adult placing those demands. Make sure you reinforce when the child does follow directions. Great job. Humor. Some kids have a good sense of humor. When we say clean up the palace, that means clean up. High probability, if your child likes to feed the class pet, then he does get out his folder. Schedules. Here's some examples of schedules, and there's some with actual items. There's some drawings. The first then, so that gives a simple task. First you do this, then you get this. I'd always think about structure. Elementary classrooms are highly structured. You know what's expected in all the areas in the room. When you get to high school, it's not quite so able to tell. So sometimes in the home, parents need to structure the house, or I structure the table with dividers and such. Schedules of this would show the sequence. This was done by one of our families with us when a child was in a clinical trial, and the boy was nonverbal and did very well in the clinical trial because he knew exactly what was expected of him. In fact, one time the doctor didn't do the blood draw or the EKG, and he kept pointing to it because he knew he didn't do it. He missed it. Timers are effective for some people, and the nonverbal, the non-auditory ones are sometimes helpful just to see time lapsing. Visual support. Social stories are terrific for going on to help to understand what's expected. I often believe in role play and rehearse. This is a little girl who used to want to be next to her mother at all times. So we did like we kind of created a where's Waldo or where's mommy. She could be upstairs, she could be in the bedroom. She was somewhere in the house. She didn't have to be next to her at all times. This is Barbara, you're on red. We knew this is a school's program for behavior, so we modeled it at home and practiced. This looks just like my classroom, and it did. We had and that was the way we helped her to understand the structure of school. Toilet training, I'll just give 2 minutes on this. I know that there was a question about toilet training. I think there's many, many different toilet training programs. I've done quite a number of I've toilet trained a lot of children, but really a critical piece is the readiness of the child. Does he have any way to communicate? The motor skills, now you don't necessarily need all the motor skills, but does the child have a sensation? Does he feel when he needs to have a bowel movement or urinate? Is there constipation or loose stools? Those things need to be taken into consideration. Does the child show discomfort when they're wet or dry? Can they remain dry for several hours? Do they have regular bowel movements? Do they sit? Do they enter the bathroom even? That's the beginning stage. I don't know that at least pulling down sweatpants would be something that at least could help to the independence of it in the future. The readiness is very important. Is the parent or the staff? Is the timing? You know, when you know you're going to be home and really give it your all. Don't plan at a time where you're going to have to be in and out of the house a lot. The commitment. taking baseline data is often a good way to figure it out, whether or not there's any sense of, can you get the child on a scheduled training that you can at least achieve, that you can catch the child enough. Identifying reinforcers that would reinforce the behavior of maybe in the beginning entering the bathroom, then when we get some success. Scheduled training, oftentimes at the beginning, we are trained first and then the child gets trained. Planning and charting is important to see, like I said, to figure out whether there's a actual pattern. Frequent assessment of the response. So I had a little girl that stopped drinking water because she didn't want to pee, and use void in the toilet. And then she started holding her stool, and we said, you know what, this is not good. We need to step back. She was on meds for seizures, and we really wanted her, so we stepped back and revisited it in a couple of months, and we were able to succeed. It wasn't the right time for her. When I think about being with children, I think, what do we do? We use our voice and tone. We make sure we're at the child or the person's level. Think about things the person likes, and we can talk about that. These are things that we have available at ourselves. I think about the little Home Depot little aprons, have some reinforcers available, if not in an apron in your pocket. Minimize your known triggers and use your visual supports are so helpful. These are effective strategies, and I will leave with this. Whenever possible, offering some choices. These are things you can do at all times. And we talked about many of these other things, but don't underestimate the value of calm, particularly when a child is having a behavioral tantrum or such, and controlling what you can, which is the environment and your responses. These are some places for you to go and to create some charts and some ideas about social stories and various interventions. Questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
It's Sarah. I'm a parent here.
Hi.
So you touched on just at the end there about a little girl who had meds for epilepsy, and you had to take a step back. Obviously, most of our children do have seizures, and it has obviously a massive effect on behaviour. And you're saying how communication is behaviour and behaviour is communication, but sometimes quite often it feels, you're not sure whether it's seizure related, what you're seeing, or in fact if it's a side effect of a medication that you're trying. And
so I think that
basically what do you do when you have these kind of times where you're not sure whether that behaviour is seizure related, is medication? I know you're kind of finding the function of the behaviour, but
right,
sometimes you're stuck with that behaviour for quite a few months at a time while you're changing meds, while you're addressing the seizures. So how do you work with a child who is having these, it's almost as uncontrolled as a person who's being sick, these kind of aggressive outbursts. So yes. How do you work with a child when they, you can't, not give reinforcement because they're not giving the response. Do you know what I mean? It seems
right.
But they can't do it sometimes. But you don't even know if it's a behaviour, it's an avoidance, an escape, or if in fact it is seizure related and they can't actually do anything. They can't modify their behaviour. So I guess my question is, can you change that response when you through ABA?
Well, I think that. Sorry.
Go on.
No, I think that there's places where it's so complex in that there's multiple functions and multiple reinforcing, but when possible, and I always take into consideration if the child is sick. So keeping a good data collection of, and you don't always know if there is seizure activity, of course, but if the child's not slept well for the night, then what I try to do is set the child up that day in their schedule, they have less demands. If I know putting on your socks is really a challenge, is that a day that I have to, if I know the child's having, because every child is different, but you as a parent or the teachers that work with the child potentially should say that, I think that right now it's treating him like he's not well. So what would be things that he would like to do under your control, like put on a schedule? So if I could put 10 things on for the day. It would be blowing bubbles, going for a ride, sitting in a swing.
I mean,
but I put
what
them.
we definitely find is that you know, that his learning just takes a back seat when these periods happen, and it's just like, to quote his teacher, we're just keeping him safe at the moment. So I don't know, I guess I'm just expressing frustration that so often those learning skills and where you get to with behaviour, you know, giving good reinforcement for good behaviours, that actually has to just go completely out of the window sometimes because of the medication, because of the epilepsy.
Yes, and
this is Jen, actually, the neurologist. Can I
good. Thank you.
Okay, so one of the things that I think is really difficult, and I've struggled as a clinician, is really trying to work, get your clinician and your doctor, or your doctor and your BCBA and your therapist to kind of be on the same page about medication changes and such. The great thing about BCBAs are that they are all data driven. And so I often work with BCBAs directly, and I say, we're going to try this medication, or we're going to switch a medication. If you could kind of keep in touch and let me know how things are going based on this change, this is what I'm expecting, this is what I worry about. And, you know, they usually, I guess everybody's a little bit different in how they collect their data. Your therapist should be able to kind of mark down in their kind of data tracking, okay, we added a new medication, oh, we changed the medication, and asking your clinician, okay, we're going to switch the seizure medicine. What should I expect in terms of side effects, and what's the timeline? So for example, valproic acid or Depakote, great seizure medicine, but usually can make you tired. Usually I would counsel patients that over the next couple weeks, they probably will be tired. If they're tired, I'm not as worried. We're going to go slowly. And then let's see, once they get over that sleepy period, how things go after that. So one would be asking your clinician, what are things that we should realistically be expecting in terms of side effects? 2, linking up your therapist or BCBA with the doctor, saying, these are meds and what do we look out for you? 3, I would say, if you can videotape any funky things, any behavioral changes, anything weird looking to you. I get emails every week of parents who say, I'm not really sure what this is. And so I look at it and I say, well, you know, that really concerns me. I think you should come to the hospital. Or I say, you know what, doesn't really look too scary to me. Let's keep an eye on that and keep a log of what's going on. And then you can kind of be in constant communication with your provider to say, is this concerning? Is this concerning enough that I need to worry about it? Keeping your own kind of diary of, in my non-neurological terms, funky things that happen to my kid. Is really kind of critical. And then you can review it with the BCBA or your speech therapist. And I get referrals from audiologists, speech therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists who say, you know, I'm concerned about something I saw in clinic in session. What do you think? And then we can all have a frank conversation about what are red flags to me that are concerning for seizure versus side effect. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. I'm actually sorry.
And to piggyback on that,
so we don't have an ABA therapist, but the school does work in that kind of data collecting way. So, but yeah, it makes sense what you're saying. That is basically what's happening.
And to piggyback on that, what I try to do is that I know that child, and I was an educator for many years, like 30 years before I even got my BCBA, but my background was strong behavioral, but I'm also very child-centered, and I appreciate where the child is coming to the classroom or the therapy session. So if, for example, I know they didn't sleep all night and they're not feeling well, that is not the day that I'm going to do the easiest things that I could do that I can reinforce, even if it's playing, okay? If I'm trying to teach the child to use a schedule, for example, then what I would do is put on the schedule all the things that he or she likes. So the learning is that I'm using that schedule to get what I like. Do you know what I'm saying? like at least I'm learning something that day. The worst that I would want to do is to create situations to be more frustrating and to reinforce then that he or she is having difficulty and not gaining any access to anything positive of the day. So, but thank you for the question. But it is difficult, especially like Doctor was saying too, is the medications, the sleep disruption, and I always, as when I go into schools and such, I'm like, I'm not the easiest going person, but I'm very respectful. Think about, what are realistic today. Each day is a new day.
And actually with SYNGAP, I would say it's not day by day. It can be literally minute by minute.
Minute by minute.
Jekyll and Hyde kind of switch flipping thing.
Well, and I think then using those schedules might be something that could be, is your child use a picture exchange at all, or?
Yeah, he uses an AAC device, and they do use picture exchange at school.
And does he use it to communicate?
Yes, when he's okay. It all just goes out the window when he's not okay. But yeah, and it literally can go from minute to minute. It's like a switch flipping. So sometimes you can, be on a bit of a roll and start something else, and all of a sudden we're in, difficult mode, and that's when you have to pare everything right back. So it's keeping on the ball from minute to minute of where he's at, I think, which is the really hard thing to do when you're trying to teach skills. Yeah.
One thing I hear a lot, this is Jen again from neurology, is that it's a really difficult balance for parents to know, do I push my child to do this therapy on the way or not? And I think that the best thing that you're able to do, or my recommendation is you're there to motivate your child. And parenting any child is difficult in terms of pushing your child but not pushing them too far. And so the delicate balance is really kind of difficult, and it's person to person specific, and every day, some days are good and some days aren't as good, and it's okay, because that, and we know that you are doing everything in the best interest of your child, and being with providers that you're with every day, whether that's the teacher, the BCBA, whoever that is in your life, that kind of knows, okay, where's that fine line and how far do we want to push them, is okay to have that conversation and to change that conversation, because goals are going to change as the child changes, and every day you have to kind of start with a fresh look. In terms of change, for me, I see patients, once every other month, once every 6 months. And so it's easier for me to see change. And I think it's harder for you guys who are there every day.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. And so it's really hard for you guys to step back and say, okay, have we made progress? And for me to say every 3 months, yeah, you have 2 more skills knocked off there, but it was really hard for you guys to get there. I think it's something to know that, it's different for every parent, but seeing change is slow. It's going to be slow day to day. So if you're seeing those changes day to day, that it's okay to wait a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month to say,
or actually regress quite a lot and actually have to go back quite a long way. And sometimes,
But I think your question is certainly really important and critical for a lot of parents. Every parent, how far do I push my kid? Knowing their limitations, because you don't want to harm them. And I get that question a lot. I don't want to harm my child if I'm pushing them too hard. And I think that's okay. I think realistically, you're not going to push them too hard, but you do have to be appreciative of a delicate balance, and that's really okay. It's something that I think a lot of you guys can talk about offline.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. This is Erica. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. My daughter is extremely aggressive to other children, in a sense that, and I asked this question mainly because I'm really excited to have you on here, because we don't have ABA in our area, so or even available to our kids much here at all. So I don't really, this has been a question on my mind really hard. But anyway, so small children, she's extremely aggressive toward them to the point that we're foster parents, but we can't have anyone younger than her in our home.
How old is she?
She's 8.
Okay.
And any child shorter or smaller than her, she will push them and pinch them until they hurt. I mean, she will literally try to hurt them. Other children I've noticed on the playground, we've tried to stop it, but it's natural. She'll go up and she'll push a little girl and they'll go, ooh, and they'll run from her and they play chase. And I think that's kind of where it stems from, but we don't know what to do.
I think some of it is too. Yes, I've had that with other children and when you think of it, young children, younger, like toddlers or smaller, oftentimes are less predictable. So I've had some children that really were fearful or they cry, they're more sudden. And what has to happen too is sometimes is that if the child doesn't have those breaks or those gates in themselves, it's kind of like trying to figure out. I have a young boy that we thought on the playground, we thought he was eloping, but really what he was he wanted to be chased. So we figured that out after time, but we kept saying he kept running. But when a child runs on a playground, what do people do? They run after him. And in the school, they were saying, go run after son and so and so. And so then he got all the kids in the classroom running. So what we did with him was we created playtime and there was an aide in the classroom that was assigned to him who would be on the playground with him, and we would create opportunities and he didn't talk, but we would use a sign card that said chase me, and we would chase on the playground in a designated area. So we practiced that, but in the beginning people thought he was running away. I don't know that she's getting this.
She's not at all, because it does not generalize at all with anything really ever. But it's just, and she does it, she'll make a mean face and then she will push them until they fall and hit their head.
But potentially she doesn't understand. Like, I think, is it aggression to be aggressive, or is that she doesn't understand the response she gets?
I think it's aggression to be aggressive.
Or is that she doesn't
won't do it unless they'll cry.
Or she likes she likes the response. She doesn't know how to play appropriately. Does she have any appropriate skills to play? Not really. No. So, in the lack of having something appropriate, this is something she knows how to do, which doesn't sound nice or feel nice as a parent or a teacher, but it's that she likes the response, basically. And it's almost as if she's making a face of what she's going to get from the other person. So I would think I would probably have to set her up and it may take time, and like developmentally, how young is she? So she may be much younger.
She's testing at school like 17 to 24 months.
Right. And if you think about that age group, children at that age, typical kids, bite their mommies, pinch your underarms, do things and look at you, make a face and cry. It's like almost like a very, I don't understand it. Or kids, I've had kids and I think it's so horrific, but they put their fingers into the dog's eyes. I don't think that they do it.
Still do that.
Right? Yeah. So it's that young, sometimes that's where we get the behaviors, is that it's somehow reflective of where the person is. So respectfully, you wouldn't expect a 17 to 24-month-old to play on a playground. So what we would have to do then is create games for her to play with the staff, basically, because she's more of an adult-related child right now. And gradually, if we can figure out a way that if she likes to be chased, minimally, we could teach her to, does she use pictures or sign? Or?
Well, she likes for them to run while she stands and watches. She'll push them and let them run. And then when they stop, they'll push them again. And the little girls will do it, or they'll flip or turn a cartwheel, and then they'll run. And they think it's cute because they're not 8, 9 years old.
So then I would take them and actually, if it was okay with the school, because oftentimes the schools are fine to work with it, and like they did it with this little boy that I work with recently. And basically let's teach her, give her an appropriate way to ask the other kids to run. She likes to, so sometimes kids, do you ever see kids that just like to watch leaves drop? They like to watch, they pick up mulch and like to watch it fall. So sometimes it's watching things, you know what I'm saying? Like she likes the movement. Right. So then I would teach her and figure a sign that every time she gives that sign to those kids, and you could do it in gym, the teachers, they could help generalize it. So she's learning, this is what I do to get what I want, at least at this one occasion, you know.
Okay. So how would you transfer that over to a small child, like a 2 or 3 year old?
Right now, I would say that I would be the block right now. For now, I would think I might need to be. It's just like saying, on a playground, do you put up the gates, or do you have, do you expect that this child's going to fall and have a boo-boo? Do you know? I would say that you know pretty much that she doesn't, I don't know that she understands as much. Once you start stepping back and saying, okay, you already analyzed it, you're a good behavior analyst, you figured out that she likes the movement, and the other kids, if you can get them to only do the movement when she gives a sign to them or a card, however it's the appropriate way, then that's a beginning, okay?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
All right, and I think we have time for one more quick question. If anyone has another question for either Jen Bain or Barbara Haas-Givler. All right.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Short question. My name is Rena from Germany, and I have a 4.5-year-old boy with a SYNGAP syndrome, and we have this biting and scratching the underarms and hair pulling stuff. We tried to get ABA therapy here, but it's very, very difficult, and they told us, we can do that with teach. And do you have some tips for us how to get rid of this behavior?
Is it self-injury or is it aggression? Is he doing it? Is he do it when he's frustrated?
Where it's mostly frustration. We have biting his underarms, but also biting us and scratching our underarms and pulling our hair. So we have both self-injuries and injuring other people.
And there's no, the teach program I'm familiar with is more of a teaching component of teaching, not necessarily a behavior. It is under the ABA kind of a toolkit, so to speak, but it's not necessarily, I always see it more of in the classrooms for teaching activities. I would try to get a sense of how often does this happen? Is it all the time? When his own underarms, he bites his own underarm?
Yeah.
Does he have any communication ability?
We have an ASC device, but we just started it, and his environment, the people around him, they don't model enough as it is necessary. So we're just in a convincing phase that they should join our team and model around him.
Mm-hmm. And does he do this at school, the scratching and pulling people's hair?
At school and at home, both.
And how do they handle it?
And they are he's biting other kids and biting the kindergarten teachers.
I think that it's really hard, but it's almost like getting a response. They call it response blocking. Like when he's going to bite, I'm not, it's almost like preventing it and getting him into something else. Are there things that he really likes, or times a day, or things that he's doing that he doesn't bite?
Okay, yeah, he loves water and music, so maybe you mean they should distract him to prevent him, and they need to see the early signs.
Yeah, and engage him in the positive things, and because he's going to have to practice. First of all, he doesn't probably know how to communicate very well. right? So if he's not using his aid, what happened right before he bit his underarm at home, for example? What do you think happened?
Denied access to the bathroom.
Okay, because he wants to play in the water?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So this visual schedule, even for kids that are not very verbal, if you create a schedule that has bathroom, a picture, does he recognize photos?
Yes, he does.
Okay, a picture of the bathroom with the tub with the water in it, whatever, or a picture of his tub toy, then a picture of him in the kitchen or doing something else. Like picture him doing things if he recognizes himself as well on the picture. And then it's going to take time, though. It's not going to happen overnight, but show him that picture. And first do this, then bath, or bathroom. If there's other things, to mix it up with some music, right? So if he likes music on the TV, he likes music on the computer, music on you singing songs, I would kind of try to really set him up that he can practice doing the things that he really likes. It doesn't always have to be water in the bathroom. Can you shape it up that he has water in a small bin in the kitchen and he helps you do dishes? Does he like bubbles?
This, yeah, we do this, yeah.
So I think those are the only ways to help. And then, but showing him in picture that these things are coming again. So in his world, potentially, these are his, like, the less you have them to like, the more powerful it is. So that when he doesn't have it, it's the end of the earth for him, right? So if you can show him visually, it's coming next. And even though in the beginning he may not understand it, over time, if every time you do this, you show him the picture of the bathroom, he gets to go in there. Let him hand you the picture of that bathroom. And maybe in the beginning he's in there more than you like, but to get him out of there, you might have to then take him to music, right? You're not going to take him, it's not like you do from such a high preferred, you're going to get him to go and do something not preferred. Does he like to eat his dinner or snacks?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I would put all the things that he likes to show him this is his day, because he doesn't have an organization of his day. He's in the here and now, right? Probably, he's young. He's a young guy, even if he didn't have any differences. So visual schedules really can help, and I would encourage the schools should be able to do those, and if anything, they should have the programs to help you as well, to do some for your home. And some of those handouts I have, definitely have some places where you can create your own charts for your child. Okay?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I think our time is up.
Yeah, we are now at 5 o'clock. Thank you so much to Barbara and Jen Bain for your presentations, and of course to all of the families that participated and contributed data in Simon's BIP. We really, really appreciate your participation. Now that the meeting is over, I'm going to ask